A 7-year-old child stood in the middle of his father's funeral and kept saying, "My dad is still alive." And the truth that followed left everyone frozen in place. The heavy wooden door swung open without a sound. The pews inside the church were nearly full. The light outside was pale, with a steady drizzle, not quite a rain, but just enough to make the stone floor slick, and every footstep echo sharp and cold. Lucy guided Leon inside. She was Thomas's younger sister, the man lying in the casket at the front. She lived alone, worked as a librarian in a town a few miles away, soft-spoken, not good with comforting words, and even worse at being anyone's anchor. Yet, here she was, trying to be both for a child who had just lost his father. Leon, 7, was Thomas's only son. He was small for his age, with dark brown eyes that always looked like they were deep in thought. Since the night his father had the accident, Leon had barely spoken. No tears, no tantrums, just silence and watchfulness. They sat in the third pew, left side of the aisle. Lucy said nothing. She gently pulled Leon's scarf up around his neck, then sat upright, her gaze fixed on the dark wooden casket resting in front of the pulpit. On its lid sat a single bouquet of white flowers. No frills, no colors. That was how Thomas had lived. Quietly, neatly, never one to draw attention to himself. Father Joseph stepped forward. He had been a long-time friend of Thomas's. People in town respected Joseph not only for his calm presence, but also for his uncanny memory and a rare depth of compassion. He looked older than the last time Lucy had seen him, but his eyes still held their light. Joseph was speaking about Thomas, a devoted father, a quiet man, but always someone who showed up exactly when you needed him. Thomas chose a simple life, stepping away from the noise so he could give his time to what mattered most, his son, Leon. The moment that name was spoken, Leon stood up. No one had time to react. He turned to face the casket and spoke. "My dad is still alive." The words weren't loud, but they rang out clearly in the solemn room. Someone coughed softly. A few heads turned. A woman near the back clicked her tongue and whispered to the person beside her. Lucy took Leon's hand and gently tugged. "Sit down, Leon. You're upset. We'll talk later." But the boy didn't move. His face stayed firm as he continued. "Dad told me I had to say that, if this ever happened." Joseph paused mid-reading. He stepped down 2 steps and walked toward them. "What do you mean, if what happened?" "Dad said if there ever came a day when people were standing around a wooden box and calling it him, then I had to say, 'My dad is still alive.'" A wave of doubt passed through the front rows. Lucy grew flustered and leaned toward Joseph, whispering, "Father, please, don't mind him. He's too young. He doesn't understand what loss means." "And if Dad isn't wearing his watch," Leon went on, eyes still locked on the casket, "then that means he's not in there." That watch, with its brown leather strap and the initials T and L engraved on the face, was a gift from Lucy to Thomas when Leon was born. Thomas had called it his lucky charm. He wore it every day on his right wrist, even though he was left-handed. Joseph turned toward the casket. He had seen the body lying inside. And yes, there was no watch. "Father Joseph," came a man's voice from the back of the room. Mr. Preston, who ran the town's building supply store. "I think we shouldn't prolong a funeral based on a child's words." Joseph was silent for a few seconds. Then he returned to the pulpit. "I understand, but I've known Thomas for over 10 years. And if a 7-year-old boy says something like that, with that kind of certainty, I believe we owe Thomas a moment to find out the truth." Lucy didn't agree, but she didn't stand in the way. Joseph gave a signal to Mr. Wilkins, the funeral home director. They whispered to each other for a moment. A few guests rose from their seats. Some sighed quietly, Others straightened up, waiting. Leon quietly reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, quarter-folded piece of paper. "Dad left it in my pillow. The morning he went to work." Joseph took it. On the paper was a line written in ballpoint pen. "If the watch is missing, it means he was forced. If anyone doubts it, tell them Leon says, 'Dad is still alive.'" Below was a familiar signature. Lucy stood on the front steps, arms wrapped tightly around Leon. Both of them still had their coats on. The house still carried the scent of peppermint tea. Thomas's late afternoon habit mingled with the smell of old books and pine wood. Leon was the first to let go. He walked inside on his own, took off his shoes, and placed them neatly by the rug. That small gesture hurt Lucy more than any tears could have. "Are you hungry?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Leon shook his head and headed straight for his old bedroom. Everything was still in place, as if Thomas had only stepped out to pick something up. Lucy wandered into the kitchen, her fingers grazing familiar objects. The kettle was still sitting on the stove. Half a bottle of honey remained untouched. Lucy stood on the front steps, arms wrapped tightly around Leon. Both of them still had their coats on. The house still carried the scent of peppermint tea, Thomas's late afternoon habit, mingled with the smell of old books and pine wood. Leon was the first to let go. He walked inside on his own, took off his shoes, and placed them neatly by the rug. That small gesture hurt Lucy more than any tears could have. "Are you hungry?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Leon shook his head and headed straight for his old bedroom. Everything was still in place, as if Thomas had only stepped out to pick something up. Lucy wandered into the kitchen, her fingers grazing familiar objects. The kettle was still sitting on the stove. Half a bottle of honey remained untouched. The calendar on the wall had stopped on the day of the accident, the day Thomas was gone. She went to Leon's room. The boy was sitting on the floor, a stuffed animal pillow in front of him, the one he used to sleep with. Carefully, he unzipped the pillow cover and pulled out a small cloth pouch, the same one he had reached into that morning. "Is there anything else in there?" Lucy asked, settling down beside him. Leon opened the pouch and took out a fresh AA battery, a tiny red key, and another piece of paper. Completely blank. "Dad said, if he didn't come back, I had to find the red box," Leon whispered, as if repeating a lesson drilled into him over and over. Lucy suddenly remembered. Once, in the storage shed, Thomas had pulled her away just as she was about to touch a red box. He had only laughed then and said, "It's nothing, just something for later." She reached out and took the key. "Do you remember which box this goes to?" Leon nodded. "The metal one on the highest shelf in Dad's room. He used to hide all his important stuff there." Lucy stood up. Her steps were light, but the wooden floor still creaked beneath her feet. She opened the door to Thomas's room. The air inside felt sealed shut, untouched. His usual coat still hung on the wall hook. On the desk, his pen lay at an angle, and the notebook was left open to a page with a bold line in black ink. Contingency, trust no one. She looked up at the top shelf. Sure enough, there was a red box, lightly covered in dust. Lucy reached for it, slid the key in. Click. It opened. Inside was an external hard drive, a small silver USB stick, a printed draft of a death certificate, no official stamp yet, and a sticky note with a single line. "If I disappear, it wasn't an accident. Look for the data on the USB, and don't leave Leon alone." Lucy sank to the floor, her back against the cabinet, her hands trembling slightly. Leon sat just outside the door, watching her. "Your father was prepared," she said softly. "This wasn't random." Leon didn't answer. He turned away and walked back to his room. That night, Lucy couldn't sleep. She sat in front of the computer, plugged in the USB, but the first file was encrypted. The screen displayed a single word: password. On the desk, under the dim lamp, Thomas's old wristwatch lay still. Letters were etched into its back. Lucy typed T-L 2016. The screen stayed silent. An error message popped up. Incorrect password, 2 attempts remaining. She exhaled, rubbed her forehead, and tried again with TL 2016. Still wrong. Leon sat up suddenly, his voice groggy but certain. There might be an ampersand. Dad used to write it that way. Lucy retyped T&L 2016. The screen flickered. A folder appeared. Evidence. But when she opened a video, Thomas's voice came through, soft but clear. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it back. Don't trust anyone claiming to be an old colleague of mine. They're hiding something. They're not just after me. They'll come for Leon. Lucy stared at the screen, her eyes lingering on that folder name. Evidence. She moved the mouse, opened another file. This time, an audio recording. Thomas's voice came again, unmistakable. Not panicked, but clearly urgent. It's 2:18 a.m. I'm saving the third backup now, just in case. If I don't return, find Dr. Miranda Co. She knows what I refuse to do. And check the Greyfield 17 account. That's where it all started. Lucy jotted down every word, her hand moving quickly over the table as she searched for a notebook. She picked up her phone, took a photo of the screen. Every action now could carry the weight of legal evidence. Outside the room, Leon sat in a chair, still awake. He was carefully arranging scraps of paper their father had once left inside a book, one piece at a time. Nothing was ever done by accident. He'd understood that from a very young age. Lucy plugged the hard drive into the printer and printed 3 copies of the files. She folded one set into thirds and slipped it into her coat pocket. Another she left on the table. The last she hid deep inside the thickest book on the shelf. She walked down the hallway, flipping on each light switch, checking every lock, cracking Leon's door open just a bit to look in. He was still awake. She didn't say anything. He didn't ask. Lucy returned to her desk. She opened her email and drafted a message addressed to 3 different recipients, but didn't send it. Her finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then she deleted everything. She didn't trust anyone. Not right now. She stood up, locked her computer, pulled out the USB drive, and slipped it into the inside pocket of her coat. Tomorrow, she would go to the hospital, and if anyone else knew the rest of the truth, that person would be waiting for her there. Lucy stopped in front of the hospital entrance at 7 in the morning, clutching her handbag tightly against her chest. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the main lobby was already filling with people. She walked up to the reception desk, her voice steady and firm. "I'm Lucy Bennett. I'd like to see Dr. Miranda. Please let her know I'm here about Thomas." The receptionist looked up and studied Lucy for a moment before picking up the phone and murmuring quietly into the receiver. 5 minutes later, a nurse led her to a conference room on the 2nd floor. Miranda Co. appeared in the doorway, a resident physician of Asian descent in her early 40s, who had worked with Thomas on several research projects involving medical data. She wore a white lab coat, her face bare of makeup, the fatigue of a night shift lingering in her expression, but her eyes were clear and alert. "Miss Lucy Bennett, please, come in." The door closed behind her. Miranda gestured toward a chair. "Thomas once told me that if anything ever happened to him, someone named Lucy would come looking for him. I'm guessing that person is you." Lucy nodded, her hand gripping the strap of her bag. Miranda placed a thick paper file on the table. "This doesn't exist in the system," Thomas gave it to me the night before he disappeared. He was wearing a raincoat, completely soaked, but his face was calm, not afraid, just like he was bracing for something inevitable. He said only, "You had the right to decide. Open it or burn it." Lucy opened the file. Inside was a list of patients, along with lab results and pathology analyses. Each page had 2 sections, one labeled Official, already filed in the hospital system and sent to the insurance companies, and another marked Internal, containing professional notes, original diagnoses, or the actual findings. The discrepancies made Lucy's skin crawl. Some of the internal records clearly indicated serious medical conditions, yet the official documents labeled them as mildly positive or no concerning symptoms. A few results had been blatantly redacted. Miranda whispered, "Thomas is a software engineer. He designed the system that stores and processes medical records. His job was to ensure absolute accuracy and transparency. But then he discovered the system was being tampered with. Someone was altering results to align with insurance reimbursement requirements." Lucy swallowed hard and kept flipping through the pages, her eyes locked on the cold, clinical lines of text. A deep unease slowly crept through her. Did he say who was behind it? Miranda shrugged quietly. No direct evidence, but Thomas suspected Vincent Dane, the head of the biomedical research department and the liaison with major insurance providers. On the surface, he's polished, polite, always acts by the book. But Thomas believed he was hiding something. Lucy closed the file, her fingers still gripping the edge of the folder, as if trying to etch every detail into memory. She looked at Miranda, her voice rough but firm. "This can't end here." Miranda nodded, her gaze softening. "Thomas believed you'd know what to do. And I trust he was right." Lucy walked out of the hospital with the folder clutched tightly to her chest. The sky had cleared completely. For the first time, the anger inside her took on a defined shape, something solid, smoldering and sharp. She knew she wouldn't stop. On the chair by the porch, Leon sat curled up with an old book in his hands. The afternoon sun filtered through the wooden awning, casting a soft light across the frayed spine. He sat quietly, eyes fixed on the words, though his ears picked up the light footsteps of Lucy approaching from behind. She placed a file folder on the table, then slowly pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. Their eyes met. No words were needed. They both understood that whatever Lucy held would change everything. "Dad left something important behind, didn't he?" Leon asked. His voice wasn't quite a question. It sounded more like a quiet acknowledgement. Lucy didn't answer right away. She opened the folder and pointed to the sections Thomas had marked in red. Patient names, ID numbers, internal diagnoses, and how they'd been rewritten in the official records. Every page carried a truth that had been hidden. "Your father discovered someone was manipulating hospital data," she said. "They were changing test results to downplay illnesses, avoiding insurance costs or gaining some kind of financial edge." Leon frowned and flipped quickly to a page. "This name, Vincent Dane." Lucy nodded. "Your dad suspected he was behind it all, but there's no direct evidence." Leon didn't say another word. He pulled out a stack of handwritten notes and began sorting them by date, time, and ID numbers. His movements were swift and precise, like someone already familiar with his father's working rhythm. The next morning, Lucy went to the town's central library. She searched through academic journals, financial records, anything that had a connection to Vincent Dane. His name came up repeatedly in documents about risk pricing algorithms, medical data system modeling, and the coordination of capital flow between hospitals and insurance corporations. An old article quoted Dane as saying, "Transparency doesn't mean telling everything." Sometimes choosing what to reveal is its own kind of ethics. The quote made Lucy pause. She continued digging through the financial reports from the past 3 years. One irregular fund transfer stood out, from a shell company in another state to the hospital's biomedical research department. The authorization signature, Vincent Dane. At a small cafe near home, Leon sat quietly by the window, Thomas's old laptop open in front of him. He clicked through folders, one by one, comparing the hard drive data with what his mother had passed along. A hidden, encrypted file flickered into view. The file name unclear, but the size and storage path felt strangely familiar. Leon tried entering his own birth date, a code only someone close to him might guess. The screen blinked. The folder opened. Inside wasn't just a single audio recording, but 3 additional files. A photo of a torn profile page, a chart comparing timestamps of data edits, and a video clip. He opened the video first. In it, Thomas sat at his desk, recording himself with the laptop's front-facing camera. His face was drawn, and his eyes kept darting toward the window behind him, like he was afraid someone might be watching. He spoke softly, enunciating every word. Day 14. I uncovered 2 more cases of data tampering. One of them, patient 1082, didn't make it. Dane claimed it was a system error, but Rudy was there that day. I heard him say, "Alter the original sample. Leave no timestamp." The screen dimmed. Leon opened the next photo, a medical record page with a handwritten red note. Follow-up exam, ignore plasma levels. And right beside it, a messy signature, Rudy. Finally, he put on the headphones and played the audio recording. Thomas's voice came through, calmer this time, as if he'd rehearsed it. "If I don't make it back, Lucy needs to know about Rudy." He kept all the notes from the meetings. Once I heard Dane say, "If anything's off, Rudy will fix it. Leave no trace." They thought no one was paying attention. But I documented every change. That afternoon, Lucy drove out to the Belltown district. According to the records, Rudy had once been a senior technician specializing in data processing, working with Thomas during the early stages of the Medical Archive System project. He was a quiet man who lived in isolation after being suspended for violating internal protocols, an accusation that was never explained. After that, Rudy disappeared from all formal employment, but according to Thomas, he continued working behind the scenes for Vincent Dane as a kind of data janitor. The place was an aging complex, tucked behind 2 rows of faded red brick buildings. The air was thick with mildew, and sounds from the narrow alley echoed like the breath of somewhere long forgotten. She stepped into the corner grocery store and approached the man arranging boxes behind the counter. "Excuse me, I'm looking for someone named Rudy. He lives around here." The man looked up and squinted. "There's only one Rudy in this neighborhood, but he only comes out at night. And not everyone's brave enough to knock on his door." Lucy thanked him, stepped back outside, and stopped in front of an old 3-story building. A window on the upper floor was lit, the curtains slightly drawn. A figure moved behind the glass, just barely visible. She returned to her car, sat still, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Part of her wanted to walk right up and knock, but another part, more rational, more cautious, told her she needed to be ready. Her phone buzzed. A text from Leon. "Aunt Lucy, the recording says Rudy's the one who edited the report. Dad thinks he might still have the original." Lucy read it twice. Then she nodded to herself, her eyes still fixed on the glowing window. Night had fallen. Rudy's shadow stretched long across the stained wall, like a sign that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, was beginning to stir. Lucy remained in the car, eyes trained on the second-floor window. She held her phone, opened her contacts, but didn't make the call. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened again, then she let out a breath. She opened her notebook and jotted quickly, "Rudy, second floor, 7:30 p.m. No contact yet. Need audio. Camera prepped." Instead of knocking tonight, Lucy chose to take a step back. She needed to learn more about Rudy, his routine, who came and went, the rhythm of his life. She needed time and evidence. Meeting him now, unprepared, might only cause everything to fall apart faster. The next morning, Lucy spent time reviewing technical records and accessing public data at the city library. She found an internal memo from 2019, signed Preliminary Approval, R. Helms. Immediately afterward, she sent a disguised email posing as a medical expert, requesting that Rudy verify a test sample. When she returned to her car, the side mirror had been smashed with a scrawled message across the door, "Stay out of it." Lucy froze for a moment. She knew Rudy wouldn't do something like this, not with Thomas, not to an old friend. So if someone was sending a warning, it meant a third party was getting involved. Leon kept combing through his father's old hard drive. He remembered sitting behind Thomas during those late nights in the study, watching him type out commands. As a kid, he'd often ask what his father was doing, and Thomas, rather than brushing him off, would patiently explain. Tracking tools, how to check IP addresses, methods for tracing data. All of it felt like brain games the two of them shared. Now, Leon was using one of the very tools he'd once seen Thomas build to trace suspicious IP addresses. One address was still active, accessing a public Wi-Fi network near Belltown, which matched a surveillance trace from a camera program Thomas had written. Lucy went to the area, snapped a photo of the signal device mounted on a utility pole, and sent the info to Leon. The results confirmed it. The IP had been used by Rudy. The link between Rudy, the hospital system, and the altered data was becoming clearer. They were running out of time. That evening, Lucy printed the entire access log and clipped it together with Rudy's curt reply email. "You know who I am. Don't play dumb." No denial, no explanation. She understood. She had gotten too close. A sound came from behind the house. Lucy switched on the porch light, just in time to see a figure slip away. On the lawn lay an envelope. "Ask again, and the boy won't be safe." Her chest tightened. Leon had been noticed. At dawn, Lucy handwrote 3 critical facts and included a photo of Thomas in front of the server. Beneath it, she wrote, "I won't stay silent." She placed the envelope outside the second-floor door. Back at her car, her phone buzzed. A message. "Number 3, Donnelly's. 10 a.m. tomorrow. No threats, no demands. Just a meeting." But Lucy understood. This was the line between silence and the truth. At 9:58 a.m., Lucy stepped into Donnelly's. The smell of roasted coffee mingled with a faint trace of cigarette smoke, hanging in the air like a thin fog. Table 3 was near the window, where the light slanted across the shoulder of the man already seated, Rudy Helms. He looked older than in his profile photo. Sun-darkened face, a slight hollow in his jaw, and his fingers tapped rhythmically on the table's edge. Not from impatience, but as if by habit. Lucy sat across from him without ordering a drink. She placed her purse on her lap and kept her back straight. Rudy spoke first. "You've gone farther than I expected. He's family. I'll go farther if I have to." Rudy studied her for a long moment. The hard edge in his eyes had softened, as if something inside him was at war. From his inner jacket pocket, he pulled a tightly folded bundle of papers, but didn't hand it over. Instead, he set it on the table and kept one finger resting on the edge. "You know," he said, his voice hoarse, "I used to be Thomas's best friend. Back in the early days, when the system was being built, we practically lived in the server room together. But I was weaker than him. When the pressure hit, I caved. I told myself I was just fixing data, not giving orders." He looked up at Lucy. I've stayed silent for 4 years. Every night, I hear Thomas's voice in my head saying, "Rudy, if you don't speak up, who will?" When you sent that envelope, that was the first time I thought maybe I still had a chance to make things right. Rudy pushed a folder of papers toward Lucy. "This is everything I managed to back up before they forced me out. There are internal codes, a list of doctors involved, and the segment of code Dane used to erase access logs." Lucy didn't reach for it right away. "What about you? Why now?" Rudy pulled out another slip of paper and scribbled a few lines. "Because if I don't do this, my name will just be another entry in the system logs. A traitor." He slid the note toward her. "This is where Dane hid the deep archive. It's a data room outside the city, inside an old research facility that's been shut down. Only someone who used to run the system would know how to get in." Lucy took it and stood. "Thank you." She was turning to leave when Rudy spoke again, softly, without looking at her. "Be careful what you learn, Lucy. Sometimes the truth doesn't save anyone. It just makes them disappear faster." Lucy didn't answer, but her steps were steady and sure. The game had changed, and this time she held the cards. That afternoon, Lucy parked her car in an open lot nearly 300 meters from the old research facility. The hand-drawn map Rudy had given her led through a narrow path skirting the edge of the woods, once a maintenance route, now overgrown with brush. She wore gloves, a baseball cap, and carried a backpack with a flashlight, a pen-shaped hidden camera, and a phone loaded with covert recording software. The building sat in a valley, its concrete walls streaked with moss, the side iron door left slightly ajar. Inside, it was pitch dark, thick with the damp smell of old oil and moisture. Lucy turned on her flashlight, its beam sweeping across rows of steel shelves stretching up to the ceiling. She followed the markings Rudy had left, aisle M-4, third tier, box number 11. While searching, her hand brushed against a torn yellow warning tape that read, "Restricted access for inspectors only." She peeled it off and kept going. A few moments later, Lucy stopped in front of a file box with a faded label. Backlog, Recode Patient Series 07. Inside were stacks of medical records, a USB drive, and an external hard disk wrapped in plastic, and an old printed photo. Thomas seated at his desk, a data flow chart on the monitor behind him. A hand rested on his shoulder, the other person's face partially out of frame. She hadn't even had time to react when the main entrance groaned with the scrape of heavy iron. A coarse voice crackled over a radio. Unusual mobile signal detected in storage sector. Lucy immediately powered off all her devices, removed the backup battery, and pressed herself flat against the shelves. A beam of light scanned the ceiling, followed by the steady crunch of boots on concrete. 4 people, not maintenance staff. One of them said, "Split up. Sector M first." She slipped into a narrow passage, edging toward the old corridor. Suddenly, an overhead light flicked on. Someone had activated the power system. The motion sensors still worked. A short blare from the internal alarm echoed through the building. From a side junction, an arm reached out, brushing the edge of Lucy's sleeve. She shoved hard against a stack of cardboard boxes nearby, knocking them over in a loud crash. A distraction. "Movement in Sector L. Block the other side." Lucy pulled a piece of metal from her pocket, the old key card Rudy had given her, her hands trembling as she swiped it through the security slot at the end of the hallway. The light blinked green. The door clicked open. She slipped inside and slammed it shut behind her, pressing her body against it and locking the deadbolt. Boots thundered outside. One of them jiggled the handle. "Locked! Redirect to the outer perimeter." Inside, Lucy leaned her back against the door, breathing hard. The faint glow from the control panel cast flickering shadows across her face. On a nearby shelf, next to a stack of documents, was a network map, 3 data coordination hubs marked in red. One of them was where Thomas used to work. She took a photo of everything and carefully stored the files. Slipping out through the side exit, Lucy cut through the woods, avoiding cameras and ducking away from the sweeping beams of patrol cars in the distance. When she reached her vehicle, she left the GPS off and powered down her phone, right after sending a brief message to Leon. "It's done. Someone's snooping around. Don't text back. I'll reach out later." She gripped the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. A black SUV sat parked about 100 feet away, headlights off, but the engine idling quietly. Her phone vibrated. A message came in from an unknown number. "You won't get away so easily next time." No name, no trace. Lucy stared at the screen for a few seconds, then shut the phone off completely. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove straight to an old coffee shop on the east side of town. The one where she'd met investigative reporter Nora Banks years ago. Nora was the only person she trusted to handle the data the right way. A sharp-minded woman in her 50s who'd once cracked open a major medical corruption case with just 3 leaked lines of code. Lucy walked in with her backpack in hand. Nora looked up. "I've got something," Lucy said quietly, "and it can't wait." On the bookshelf in the old coffee shop, a copy of Silent Spring lay tilted to one side, its spine gently peeling, as if it had been opened too many times. Morning sunlight filtered through the heavy fabric curtains, casting crooked shadows of letters across the scratched wooden table. The rich smell of coffee blended with the scent of aged paper, thickening the air with a warm, weighty stillness. Nora Banks sat back against the chair, her graying hair neatly pinned up, holding a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Across from her sat Lucy, wearing a dark, worn coat, her face pale from a sleepless night, but her eyes still held that familiar steadiness. "The last time I saw him," Lucy began, resting a hand lightly on her backpack. "It was a rainy morning. He didn't say anything, just placed his hand on Leon's shoulder and left for work. I didn't know. I couldn't have known it'd be the last time." Lucy unzipped the backpack, pulling out a hard drive and a USB stick. She placed them gently on the table. "I don't know exactly what I'm carrying here. I just know if I'd waited one more day, it wouldn't still be intact." Nora plugged the drive into her personal laptop. She didn't use the cafe's equipment, didn't connect to any network, only opened her private sandbox system. The screen lit up. A diagram appeared, complex, with red arrows overlapping like a map of covert operations. "This is an internal data network," Nora said quietly. 3 processing centers. 2 of them are within city limits. But the third— She moved the mouse, zooming in on the map. A tiny dot surfaced in the middle of a forest, labeled Federal Mobile Research Unit. Phase out, 2016. Lucy frowned. "I've never heard of that place." "You weren't supposed to," Nora replied. "It was a mobile research unit, once government funded for preventive health programs, but after 2016, the project was shut down. At least, officially." They kept tracing the encrypted files. A string of phantom accounts gradually surfaced, all created from non-existent patient IDs. Millions of dollars had been laundered through them, legitimized as medical expenses and equipment purchases. Lucy fell silent. So, it wasn't just about altering test results. "No," Nora replied. "It's a system, built, maintained, and protected from the inside out. Dane didn't do this alone." Meanwhile, at home, Leon sat in front of his father's old laptop. The screen lit up with a new email. From Lucy B. Subject line, "Open this file for me." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing at the sender address. One character was off. He powered up Thomas's old machine, kept offline, and ran the file through a sandbox system his father had designed. A piece of spyware revealed itself, lightweight, invisible, but laced with code that tracked files. Someone was trying to locate a copy of Lucy's data. Leon didn't tell anyone. He simply removed the hard drive, wrapped it in cloth, and hid it deep behind a bookshelf. Then he picked up his phone and sent a single message. "Auntie, someone's trying to find the data." Less than an hour later, Lucy got a call. Police informed her that the apartment she rented had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, except for one strange detail. On her desk sat a brand new hard drive. Someone had plugged it into her computer, then left it behind, untouched. Lucy told Nora. The older woman was quiet for a few seconds, then let out a soft sigh. A bait drive. If it's ever connected to the network, it'll broadcast a signal. They don't need to steal the data, they just need to know who's holding it. "What does that mean?" Lucy asked. Nora looked her straight in the eye. "It means, from now on, we can't use any device that's ever touched the internet. And if you plan to go any further, you won't be able to go alone." Lucy tightened the strap of her bag, nodding slowly. "I won't leave Leon alone. But I also won't let Thomas be just another name, buried in an audit report." Nora gave her a small, rare smile, creased into her weathered face like something folded long ago but kept intact. "Then we'll have to do it the right way. And fast." Outside, the midday sun had begun to fade. A cold breeze passed through, flipping the sticky notes on the desk. Like even the air itself was peeling back the layers of secrecy. The air in the room felt thick with silence. On the table, Nora had set down a steaming cup of coffee, untouched. The light from the screen cast a glow on her angled cheek, revealing fine lines around her eyes, etched not by age, but by time's slow erosion of trust. Lucy stood behind her, hands tightly clasped, eyes fixed on the recording playing. A woman's voice came through, clear, composed, and deliberate. Each word weighed before it left her mouth. "Leave no trace. If they ask, say it was per Tech Department directive. Dane will sign off." The voice was no longer unfamiliar. Nora pulled off her headphones and slowly swiveled her chair around. "Evelyn Marks. She showed up once in a report I did on private hospital boards. Not someone who appears often, but always seated front and center when the big decisions are made." Lucy frowned, as if trying to place the name. "Thomas mentioned her once, back when Rudy was let go." Nora nodded. "She's head of HR and external affairs, but her power goes way beyond those two titles. She ordered Rudy's dismissal, pushed Thomas's team to restructure the data. She even personally authorized the shutdown of his individual access." Lucy sat down, gently rubbing her temple. "I need to talk to her. There's a medical conference tomorrow afternoon at Bellevue. Evelyn's the guest of honor." Lucy nodded. No more words were needed. Meanwhile, back home, Leon sat cross-legged in front of an old computer screen. The desk lamp was turned to its lowest setting, casting a soft glow over the slightly wrinkled sleeve of his shirt. Something didn't sit right. In the access logs, there was a strange IP address, an internal one, just like Thomas had once explained. Only shows up when someone's using admin rights from inside the network. Leon narrowed his eyes. It wasn't the first time. He traced it, couldn't pinpoint the source, but it was clear. A file had been accessed. With no other option, he opened the secure mailbox, the one only Lucy and Dad knew about, and sent the backup file. At the bottom of the message, he wrote simply, "If you can't open it, try Mom's birth date as the password. I think Dad would have used that." Then he sat still, doing nothing else. Night wind slipped through the window crack, cold against his skin, but Leon's mind was burning. In that moment, he realized he was no longer the kid trailing behind his father. Things were in motion now, and like it or not, he was caught in the middle of it. The Bellevue Hall was vast and cold. White lights beamed down on rows of deep blue velvet chairs, casting the kind of clarity that felt more suited to an operating room for the mind. Lucy wore a high-collared blouse, her hair neatly tied back, slim-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. More like a graduate lecturer than someone chasing down the blurred traces of a conspiracy. Evelyn Marks took the stage at 3:05 p.m. A woman in her 50s, slender build, ash-colored short hair, a clean, unpainted face. But the chill in her eyes, that was something no one could hide. After the brief speech, Lucy waited until the woman stepped down into the reception area. She approached with a calm, low voice. "Mrs. Marks, I'm Lucy Bennett, Thomas's sister." Evelyn looked at her for a few seconds. Ah, Thomas. A shame. He was a talented man. And honest, wouldn't you say? No one around them said a word. Evelyn didn't look surprised. She only raised an eyebrow slightly. I'm afraid some people don't fully understand how management is structured these days. There have been adjustments, yes, but all in accordance with protocol and properly reported. But not in accordance with ethics, right? Evelyn regarded Lucy as if reassessing her. She tilted her head slightly, her voice gentle. Everything has been taken care of. You should focus on that child. Sometimes, knowing too much only ends up hurting the ones around you. They parted as if they had never spoken. But the coldness in Evelyn's eyes as she walked away wasn't contempt. It was a clear warning. That night, Lucy received an email from Nora. The attachment was a bank statement, transactions from the last 6 months of Vincent Dane's account. One transaction stood out. Nearly $2 million had been transferred to an anonymous company called EM Horizons. Legal representative, Evelyn Marks. The chime of a grandfather clock echoed in Leon's house. The boy was waiting for a reply from Lucy. In his father's old room, perhaps for the first time, he felt he had truly stepped into the adult world, a place where no one comes to save you, except yourself. Winter was setting in. The wind off the Hudson cut through every street corner, sweeping dry yellow leaves into the empty edges of cafes that had long lost their crowd. In a 5th-floor apartment, overlooking rooftops lined with rusted tin sheets, 3 people sat around a chipped wooden table. No one spoke. Only the soft glow of a desk lamp spilled over thick folders, hand-drawn schematics streaked with red ink, and lines of dense computer code. Lucy cupped her tea with both hands, warming herself. Her eyes lingered on the last line of a file Dane had once signed. She whispered, "All of it leads back to her, Evelyn Marks. Dane was just the signer, the executor." Nora nodded, her voice hoarse after hours of poring over and hand-copying data line by line. "I suspected as much. Dane's smart, but he couldn't have orchestrated something on this scale. Evelyn could. She's built a web, tight and far-reaching, from personnel control to delegated transactions. Every decision passed through her. Nobody ever questioned it." Lucy turned the notebook toward Leon, who was sitting curled into the far corner of the table. In front of him was a small whiteboard. He held a marker, and the dreamy look of a child had given way to the sharp focus of someone fitting pieces together in his mind. "If you line it all up, the timelines, the people involved, the financial events, the tampered data," he said, writing as he connected the squares, "it all breaks down into 3 phases. First, the system's structural changes. Then, the concealment of clinical data. And finally, the administrative cleanup. Thomas got pushed out when he uncovered the second layer." Nora went quiet for a moment, then exhaled, as if someone had just lifted a heavy stone off her shoulders. This boy doesn't just understand, he sees the structure. That's what turns information into undeniable truth. Lucy looked at her son silently. His father taught him by the way he lived. They decided to reach out to Beacon 8, an independent media company that had helped Nora expose the sedative fraud scandal 3 years earlier. It was a small firm, unaffiliated with any major corporations, tight-knit, principled, and honest. A young woman named Maya, who had followed Nora's case back then, was the one who took the call. "Send everything to me. We'll handle the rest: verification, secure servers, and launching it 3 ways: mainstream media, social platforms, and an anonymous portal, so if everything gets taken down, there's still a place it survives." That night, Nora came home after a closed-door meeting with the tech team. She lived alone. Her old Toyota was still parked at the top of the hill, but when she started down the slope, she realized the brakes weren't responding. The car sped forward as if pulled downhill by both gravity and fate. Nora jerked the wheel toward an open lot and crashed into a public trash bin. She lived, cracked ribs, a shoulder injury, but alive. Lucy got to the hospital that same night. Nora lay on her side, eyes tired but still holding that usual sharp clarity. Without looking directly at Lucy, she said, "They're afraid. That means we're right." Lucy held Nora's hand tight. She didn't cry. The wind howled in bursts outside the window. People like Nora were used to walking against the wind, but Lucy was still learning, bit by bit. The next morning, Leon stepped into the study on his own. He wore an oversized hoodie, sleeves pushed up, a hard drive in one hand. "Auntie, you can't stop," he said, voice steady. "If Dad left everything to us, it means he believed we could finish it. No one else." Lucy looked at him, not as a child for the first time, but as someone walking the same path. She gave a small nod. "Let's go." 9 a.m., Nora Banks posted a lengthy message on her personal page. A rigged system, what they don't want you to know about your own medical data. At the same time, major news outlets began receiving and verifying a series of files from the independent investigative team led by Lucy Bennett and Leon Thomas. Every document was clearly signed, backed by original sources, and authenticated through rigorous analysis. In parallel, a website titled "The Last Time I Trusted a Doctor" went live. Within the first few hours, it drew tens of thousands of visits, not just from readers curious to learn, but from people determined to verify. The site laid everything bare: every edited data line, every financial transaction, every recorded conversation between Thomas and Rudy. At 10:30 a.m., the press conference at the hospital officially began, but Vincent Dane, expected to lead it, was nowhere on stage. Instead, Evelyn Marks emerged, the woman who had once moved in the system's shadows, now standing in the full glare of the lights. She wore a slate-grey blazer, held no notes, and her expression was eerily composed. The lights hit her short-cropped hair, sharpening the angles of her stance. The first question came from a female reporter, direct and unflinching. "Ms. Marks, can you confirm, was there a system in place to alter patient data in order to legitimize financial gains for third parties? And what role did you play in this?" The room fell silent. Evelyn neither frowned nor looked away. She met the camera head-on and held her gaze for a long, deliberate pause. People thought she might deny it or say something to stall, but she didn't. She set the microphone down on the table, slowly, with finality. Then she turned and walked away from the podium, without a word, without an answer. The rear door closed behind her with barely a sound. No one in the auditorium clapped. No one got up to leave right away, because everyone understood. When someone with power chooses to walk away in silence, that is the confession. Minutes later, Legal experts confirmed that many of the documents in Nora and Lucy's possession were sufficient grounds for prosecution. Within hours, the Federal Medical Oversight Agency announced the launch of a nationwide investigation. It had all started with a single USB stick and with a 7-year-old boy brave enough to say, "My dad is still alive." The first morning after the snowfall, a thin layer of ice coated Lucy's porch roof. The air was still, as if every movement was pausing to listen for something. Across the street, the maple tree in front of the library stood bare, its branches bent low, quietly bowing, as if in farewell to those who had passed through the old season. Leon sat at the kitchen table, holding a cup of warm milk, eyes gazing out the window. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just making sure everything was still there. On the small TV mounted in the corner, a special report was airing. A nationwide investigation into healthcare data fraud had officially begun. Vincent Dane's face appeared briefly, then disappeared. He had been suspended from duty and was now facing charges of abuse of power, manipulation of medical records, and conspiracy to launder money. Evidence showed that Dane had personally approved over 30 falsified test results, enabling insurance payouts based on false data. The fraud cost the federal budget millions and left dozens of patients improperly treated. At the same time, Evelyn Marks, the woman who once calmly walked out of a press briefing, is now under investigation as the mastermind behind the entire manipulation scheme. She not only signed off on controversial personnel firings like Thomas's, but also oversaw the movement of illicit funds through shell corporations. Several offshore accounts registered under Marks's name were found to have received more than $48 million over the past 3 years. The investigative agency declared this one of the most serious medical scandals of the decade, with numerous high-ranking personnel from major hospitals suspended pending investigation. A cross-agency task force was established to review the entire national database and insurance payment systems. Lucy went silent. She didn't need to listen. What she needed to know, she already knew. What needed to be done had already been done. A few weeks later, a memorial was held again on the hospital grounds, this time not to mourn something that had been lost, but to honor a life that had dared to stand against what was wrong. A small podium stood in the garden, beneath the branches of a cherry tree shedding its autumn leaves. Some people sat, others stood. Among them were doctors who had resigned, patients once nearly overlooked in diagnosis, and people who had only known Thomas by name through the headlines. But all had come, carrying something in their hearts they couldn't quite name. Leon stepped forward, a small slip of paper in his hand, sunlight slanting across his cheek. "People say my dad died that night, but I don't think he did. He just stepped back, so the truth could step forward." He bowed his head. No tears, no trembling voice, just certainty. And it was that certainty that brought tears to others' eyes. That evening, when Lucy got home, she found a strange envelope at her doorstep. Inside was a small USB drive and a slip of paper with a brief handwritten note. "If you're reading this, it means I'm okay, but I can't come out yet. Let it all be over first." She recognized Thomas's handwriting. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from hope, sudden and fierce, rising before she had the chance to brace for it. 3 weeks later, on a morning when the snow had just begun to melt, a man appeared in front of the town library. He wore a grey coat, a hood pulled over his head, his walk slightly uneven. Lucy was shelving books in the reading room when she heard footsteps stop at the door. The man pulled down his hood. The soft light caught a face thinner than before, with a faint scar along the jawline. But the eyes were unmistakable. Thomas. Leon ran out from the back room and froze in place. No one spoke for several seconds. Only their eyes met, bursting open the silence between them. Lucy stepped forward, She didn't cry, but her hands trembled as they touched his. "How are you still alive?" Thomas let out a breath, nodding gently. That night, I was cornered. An old friend from the military helped me stage the scene. The man in the casket was an unidentified victim, a homeless man who died without any next of kin. I'm not proud of it, but if I hadn't done it, I don't think I could have kept you and Leon safe. He sat down, his eyes settling on his son. Leon stepped forward and pulled an old watch from his coat pocket. "Aunt Lucy kept this for me, but I think you should wear it again now." Thomas took it. He gripped Leon's hand, then pulled him into an embrace. In that moment, there was no past, no guilt, only three people who had walked through fire, mud, and pain to stand together again. 1 year later, they no longer lived in the town. They had moved to another suburb, a place where no one knew who they were. Lucy taught part-time at a small private school. Leon wrote stories. Thomas worked as a technical consultant for a non-profit organization, one where there was nothing to hide. Nora published her book. At the end of the last page, she wrote, "Not everyone who leaves is gone forever, but those who remain honest were never truly lost." The cafe on the corner was still open, now run by a young couple. The maple tree in front of the library had grown back its leaves, its wide canopy now shading the steps where Lucy once sat every morning to read the paper. Leon had grown taller. He still rolled up his sleeves by one fold, just like Thomas used to do whenever he was about to fix something. A small detail, but enough to make Lucy pause every time she saw it. That morning, the three of them returned to the town. No one knew they had come. They went straight to the southern cemetery, the resting place of the one who had taken Thomas's place in the casket that year. A modest grave, the headstone unmarked. Only one line engraved later, at Lucy's request. A person who left in silence, so that others could go on living in truth. Thomas bowed his head and laid down a bundle of wildflowers. "I don't know your name, but I won't forget what you did. Because of you, my son is alive, and the truth still stands." Lucy stood quietly. Leon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, placing it beside the flowers. On it, he had written, "We remember you, even though we never knew who you were." They didn't stay long, just long enough for their gratitude to be expressed, not with grand words, but through simple, honest gestures. On the way back, Leon looked over his shoulder one last time. Some people are never named, but they're the reason others get to live. Thomas nodded. Lucy took her son's hand. Their steps were slow, unhurried, as if they had learned how to live with the truth, even when it no longer needed to be spoken aloud. In the distance, a group of school children was passing by the cemetery. One little one looked up, then bowed his head, following the adults. No one said a word, but that glance, gentle and brief, felt like a thank you. They turned and walked home. It's not about returning to the past. It's about coming back to the present, a place where truth doesn't need to be spoken every day, yet someone always carries it forward. There are truths that were never written down in any file, but they live on in the memories of those brave enough to keep their conscience clear. The story of Thomas, Lucy, and Leon is a quiet reminder. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from the courtroom, but from the steady, silent resolve of those who remain. What would you do if, one day, you had to choose between safety and doing what's right? How have you been lately? I hope life's treating you well and that you have someone you can count on, the way Lucy once had Leon. Thank you for staying until the very end of this story. We'll meet again on another journey where the truth will continue to be written.